Kash Patel reacts strongly to Joy Behar on live TV. The View hosts gasps. The studio lights of The View glinted off polished desks and poised expressions. Cameras rolled, coffee mugs in place. The familiar intro theme faded out. And Kash Patel, former national security official and legal analyst, sat center stage, flanked by hosts he knew didn't see the world the way he did. He was calm, calculated. His posture reflected years of high-stakes debate and deeper ideological trenches. Today's topic, criminal justice reform and cultural responsibility in America. Joy Behar began with a tone dipped in skepticism. Kash, you talk a lot about crime culture and accountability, but when you defend people who incite division, how do you justify that? Kash nodded once. Division doesn't start with speech, it starts with selective outrage and one-sided storytelling. Sunny Hostin tilted her head. So, you think the media's the problem? I think the media often chooses comfort over confrontation, but not always. He added, scanning the set. Sometimes shows like this open doors. The tension grew visible. Whoopi adjusted her seat. Joy's lips thinned. Then came the pivot. Oh, you say you're all for truth, Joy said. So, tell me, do you think systemic racism exists in policing? I think bias exists in all institutions, Kash replied. Including the media, including this one. And if we're serious about reform, we start by admitting that. A murmur from the crowd. Sunny exhaled. Joy leaned in. That sounds like deflection. Kash didn't flinch. It sounds like honesty. The same honesty I've given behind closed doors in D.C. I'm not here to perform, I'm here to speak, plainly. Whoopi interjected. Okay, so, plain talk. Do you support mandatory minimum sentencing? I support justice being fair. Mandatory minimums too often ignore context. I've said it before. It's not justice if it doesn't account for reality. It was a balanced response. But it wasn't what Joy wanted. The pause stretched. Then she muttered, just low enough, but not low enough. Go back to the zoo. The word slipped under her breath, aimed sideways. But the mic caught it, and the room heard it. The air shifted. Kash Patel sat still. His eyes didn't blink. His hands didn't move. He just set down his water glass slowly, as if to give the studio one last moment of denial. Then he looked directly at Joy Behar. I'm sorry, he said. Would you like to repeat that for the record? The audience froze. The producers didn't cut it. The camera kept rolling. Joy stuttered. I was referring to the noise level in here. No, Kash said, voice firm. You were referring to me. And if this show stands for anything truth, dialogue, or even decency, I'd like to give you a chance to clarify. Silence. Whoopi cleared her throat. Let's keep the discussion civil. This is civil, Kash replied. What's not civil is veiled dehumanization dressed as banter. Joy folded her arms. You misunderstood. No, Kash said again. I heard you. And so did America. The energy in the room was heavy. Hosts sat back. The audience didn't clap or boo, just watched. Kash continued. I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to be heard. And I'll be damned if my presence becomes an excuse for racism masked as discomfort. Sunny tried to redirect. Let's move to sentencing reform. I'd like the record to reflect what was said. Kash interrupted, verbatim. Whoopi turned to the producers off camera. A flurry of movement. Someone in the control room flagged the segment. I have worked in war zones, Kash said, voice even. I've faced worse than words. But when those words come from people with microphones and millions of viewers, they carry weight, and they carry history. Joy didn't respond. Systemic issues. Kash said don't only exist in courtrooms, they exist in studios, on panels, in polite conversations where certain people are told they don't belong. A producer stepped into view with a transcript in hand. Whoopi looked at it, then spoke. The comment has been recorded. It's on audio. Kash nodded once, then let that be the truth we start with today. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He didn't storm off. He stayed. And the room for once had nothing to say back. The segment break came and went, but the tension didn't. No makeup reapplication, no casual chatter. The air was too still. Kash Patel sat precisely where he had posture, unchanged face composed. Producers hovered near the edge of the frame, murmuring through headsets. Whoopi adjusted her cue cards, buying time. Joy Behar kept her eyes low, her fingers drumming the table softly. The crowd had quieted into a thick, almost reverent hush. They were all waiting to see what came next. The camera went live again. "Welcome back," Whoopi said, her voice tight. "Before the break, we had a moment, and it's one we are not brushing past." Kash leaned into the mic. "There's a saying in national security, what gets ignored grows. That applies here too." Joy forced a smile. "I didn't intend I'm not asking for intent," Kash cut in gently. "I'm pointing out the consequences." Sunny tried again. "Kash, in your time with the Department of Defense, you dealt with extreme situations. Do you think comparing media bias to institutional systems of oppression is really fair?" "I do," he said, "because bias, when unacknowledged, becomes institutional. It shapes perception, then policy, then live." The hosts fell silent. The audience sat rapt. "I didn't come here to start a fight," Kash continued, "but I won't shrink from one either, especially not when the fight is over dignity." Whoopi leaned forward. "So, what would you say this show should do differently?" Kash took a breath. "Invite dissent, not caricature it. Stop making guests like me into a spectacle. Let us speak and sit with what we say." Joy crossed her arms. "It's not our job to let misinformation go unchecked." "Then challenge facts with facts," Kash replied calmly. "Not with innuendo, not with muttered slurs. Truth doesn't fear confrontation. Spin does." There was a murmur from the live audience. Not applause, not gasps. Just that shift in energy, the sense that something honest had been said. Sunny raised her eyebrows. "You're accusing this show of being dishonest? I'm holding it accountable," Kash said. "That's what happens in democracies." Whoopi tried to steer back. "Let's get to the data sentencing reform. Do you have any ideas?" "I have numbers," Kash said. "I have DOJ reports. I have bipartisan studies. All of which say one thing: clearly mandatory minimums hurt more than they help. Especially in minority communities, yet you've defended tough-on-crime policies before," Joy said. Kash nodded, when the threat justified it, but blanket punishments for complex situations. "That's not strength. That's laziness disguised as order." Whoopi blinked. "So, what's your solution?" "Start by ending federal mandatory minimums for nonviolent offenses. Fund community-based sentencing alternatives, and yes, hold police accountable without demonizing them." Joy leaned back, arms still folded. "Easy to say. Harder to do," Kash agreed. "But it's worth doing, if you believe in justice at all." Sunny broke in, her tone more curious now. "What would you say to people who think you're just playing culture war politics?" Kash's answer was quick. "I'd say culture is the battlefield, and every citizen, regardless of race, party, or background, has the right to enter it without being dehumanized." A long pause. Whoopi cleared her throat. "Let's take a breath." "No," Kash said. "Let's take responsibility." There it was. Not shouted, not dramatic, just firm. And the silence that followed felt earned. Kash looked toward the audience. "I'm not here to be your favorite guest. I'm here because you invited me. And when you invite someone, you owe them the dignity of dialogue." The segment's final seconds ticked down. "Thanks for staying with us," Whoopi said, unusually subdued. "We'll be right back." The camera light blinked off, and no one moved. When the lights flicked on for the next segment, everything looked the same, but nothing felt it. There were no smiles now, no jokes. The atmosphere carried weight of a misstep, of confrontation, of truth that had slipped out too loud to ignore. Joy Behar opened the segment, but her voice trembled slightly. "We're back," she said. "We want to continue a conversation that clearly means a lot to our guest and to many of you." Kash Patel, still centered and unflinching, gave her a nod. "Appreciate that, Joy." "Dialogue only works if it continues." Whoopi shifted. "Let's talk about solutions. We've heard the critique. Let's dig into what you'd do if you had your way." First, Kash began, "We stop reducing people to party labels. Crime, sentencing, dignity, these aren't partisan. They're American." He looked at the audience. "When we talk about sentencing reform, it's not about being tough or soft on crime. It's about being smart. Right now, our system punishes poverty, punishes skin tone. That's not smart." Sunny leaned in. "So you think racism is systemic in the justice system?" "I know it is," Kash replied. "And I've seen it. It doesn't take a slogan or a protest sign. It takes data. and the data is loud. The screen behind them flashed graphs incarceration rates by race sentences for similar crimes across demographics. Kash turned to it. You don't have to agree with me, just look. These numbers aren't political, they're real, and they've been ignored too long. Joy scoffed. But aren't we making progress? Kash turned back to her. Incremental change isn't the same as justice. If a system injures millions, fixing it halfway isn't compassion, it's cowardice. A beat of stunned silence. Whoopi cleared her throat. You said earlier the media contributes to the problem. How Kash didn't hesitate. By controlling the frame. When a conservative speaks, the default isn't to ask questions, it's to question motives. That shuts down real dialogue. It paints guests like me as villains before I even speak, Sunny replied. But don't you think that's because of the company you keep? Kash smiled faintly. If I'm guilty by association, then so are you for every segment that ignores crime victims or politicizes tragedy. We're all connected to the narratives we shape. That landed. Even Joy paused. I've worked in national security law and crisis response, he added. None of those jobs required me to be liked. They required me to be right. That's the same mindset I bring here. The audience began clapping softly, not raucous support, but acknowledgement. People were listening now. Kash leaned forward. Let me be clear. This isn't about a gaffe. It's about a pattern where people of color or conservatives of color are either ignored or insulted when they refuse to fit a mold. Joy exhaled. So what do you want from this platform? Respect, he answered. And not just for me. For the viewers. For the people this conversation actually affects. We talk about crime from air-conditioned studios while mothers cry over lost sons and broken courts. Let's not pretend this is abstract. Sunny blinked. You think we're detached. I think sometimes comfort makes us forget urgency, Kash replied. You've got a massive platform, but platforms mean responsibility. The studio quieted again. Kash finished. People don't need perfection, they need honesty. Start there and everything else follows. The camera slowly zoomed out. The hosts sat silent. The show's music faded in, but nobody really heard it. America had just watched a man hold his ground, and the ground beneath the table had shifted. The commercial break ended, but the atmosphere hadn't lightened. Kash Patel remained seated, collected, while producers scrambled off stage, whispering into headsets, managing damage control in real time. Joy Behar's posture had changed. She leaned back now, arms folded, lips taut. She avoided eye contact. The tension wasn't just in the studio, it was now a trending topic. Across the country, clips from the show were already circulating. Go back to the zoo, the audio replayed. Hashtags erupted. Wanchan Kash Patel. Char the view clash, why char live bias. News networks began lining up reaction panels before the show even ended. Back on air, Whoopi tried to recover. We're a show that values truth in this moment. Well, it hit differently. We want to move forward, but we won't ignore what happened. Kash nodded, unbothered. Accountability is the only path forward, especially when power speaks casually about people it claims to respect. Sunny took a deep breath. Let's be real. Kash, you've criticized the media for bias, but what about conservative media? They spin too. Absolutely, Kash said. Bias isn't left or right. Its power is unchecked. But when the media pretends it's neutral and still perpetuates stereotypes, that's more dangerous than open partisanship. The room was listening. Even Joy. I've been in briefing rooms where words mattered, where tone could start wars. And here on a morning talk show, I heard words that cut as deep because they came without thought, and that's the problem. Joy finally spoke quiet and defensive. It was a slip. I didn't mean it. Kash looked directly at her. Then let's talk about slips, because they reveal the things we're too polite to say out loud. That's why they matter. Whoopi. Always the anchor asked, where do we go from here by facing what happened, not burying it under applause or silence. This is not just about me. This is about every viewer who's been told implicitly or explicitly that they don't belong. We proved them wrong by acknowledging this moment fully. Audience members nodded. Some even clapped quietly at first, then with more assurance. Then a shift. A voice from the audience. A woman stood up. He's right, she said. I've watched this show for 10 years. Today's the first time I saw someone not just defend themselves, but defend all of us. That ripple turned into momentum. Sunny turned to Kash, her tone softer now. Kash, you've clearly touched a nerve. Can we talk about policy again? Solutions. Absolutely, Kash said, leaning in. Let's talk about what changes lives. End mandatory minimums. Fund public defenders. Pass second chance laws. And stop pretending the justice system can be fixed without fixing the cultural lenses we apply to justice. Joy murmured. That's radical. No, Kash replied. It's overdue. He turned to the camera, speaking not just to the host, but to millions watching. You want to help Americans start by believing them. Start by trusting their experiences, even when they make you uncomfortable. That's the foundation of justice. Silence again, but not awkward this time. Reflective? Whoopi gave a slow nod. This conversation, it needed to happen. Maybe not how it started, but definitely where it's going. Kash smiled faintly. Growth never looks pretty, but it's always worth it. The lights dimmed for another break, and this time the studio audience stood and applauded, no signs, no producers prompting. Just people acknowledging a moment that had grown larger than the set. Back from break, there was a calm, but it wasn't peace. It was the quiet that follows a shift. Something irreversible had happened, and everyone knew it. The camera swept across the panel. Whoopi glanced down at her notes. Joy Behar fidgeted with a ring. Sunny Hostin kept her eyes on Kash Patel, who sat with the same posture he'd held since the start, confident, open, unmoved. This was no longer about one comment. It was about what the comment revealed. And in that silence and that attention, Kash saw opportunity. I want to say something, he began, to the millions of people watching who've been made to feel small for speaking up. I've been there. And I'm telling you right now, you are not imagining it. You are not being too sensitive. You're being dismissed, and that's the real violence. Joy shifted in her seat. But it's not enough to call it out. Kash continued. We have to understand why it happens. Because power doesn't give up space easily. It has to be claimed. The audience was silent again, not bored, captivated. Kash gestured toward the hosts. You all have shaped narratives for years. You've helped people laugh through hard mornings. But today isn't one of those mornings. Today is one of those days when laughter takes a back seat to reckoning. Joy's lips parted. Maybe to argue, maybe to apologize. But nothing came out. Let me offer a path forward, Kash said, not as a guest, as a citizen. He took a breath. Step 1, acknowledge. Step 2, reflect. Step 3, invite others who disagree without needing to destroy. Step 4, commit to change publicly. Whoopi spoke up. So that's it? A 4-step plan to fix media bias. Kash smiled. It's a start, and starting is more than most people ever do. Someone in the production booth whispered into Whoopi's earpiece. She nodded slightly. We've got about 8 minutes, she said. Let's use them wisely. Sunny leaned in. Kash, you've worked in intelligence and law enforcement. What's your take on community safety in cities often labeled as dangerous? Kash didn't hesitate. You solve crime by investing in people, not by punishing poverty. You build trust by making justice visible. That starts with officers being part of the community, not policing it from a distance. The screen flashed stats again, community crime drop rates when policing is integrated with local services. Joy spoke quieter now. Some of what you've said, it makes sense. I'm still processing it. That's all I ask, Kash replied. Don't agree, just don't dismiss it. That's how we rebuild the commons. Whoopi asked the final question of the segment. What does healing look like after a moment like this? Kash paused. It looks like staying. It looks like it's not storming off, not retaliating, just holding the space until people are ready to hear the truth without fear. He looked directly into the camera. We can disagree and still believe in each other's humanity. If we don't start there, we won't start at all. The audience, unprompted, stood again. It wasn't performative. It wasn't a celebration. It was respect. The segment ended with no outro music, just a fade to black. The screen faded to black, but the story didn't end. Phones lit up across the country. In living rooms, on subway platforms, and office kitchens, people were watching, rewatching, and reacting. The View had trended before, but never like this. Inside the studio, Kash Patel stepped off set. A producer tried to hand him water. He waved it off gently. Calm, collected. He knew something had broken open and no spin could reseal it. In the green room, a young intern muttered, "It's already on YouTube. Full clip. No edits." Down the hall, a junior host asked a stagehand, "Did you hear what he said about justice being visible?" "I've never heard it put that way." Kash, unaware or unconcerned, made his way quietly toward the guest exit. At the same time, Whoopi and Sunny sat in the dressing room silent. Joy hadn't come back in. Finally, Whoopi broke the quiet. "That wasn't just a conversation. That was a turning point." Sunny nodded. He didn't flinch. Not once. And maybe he was right. Maybe we've gotten too used to dismissing voices that don't fit. A knock on the door. It was a producer. Clips are going viral. CNN, Fox, even late-night writers are already quoting him. "Let them," Whoopi said. "Let the country wrestle with what we just did." Meanwhile, outside the studio, the sidewalk was packed. Reporters, protesters, supporters, opponents, every kind of New Yorker. Everyone is buzzing with opinions, but none louder than the simple question they asked each other, "Did you see it?" Kash stood quietly with his coat in hand, watching a group of students play back the clip on a phone. He didn't interrupt, just watched. And smiled. He didn't need to defend anything. The truth had already done that for him. Elsewhere in offices across the city, media execs held impromptu calls. "Do we invite him back? Can we book him before he hits cable?" But Kash wasn't looking for a spotlight. He was looking for impact. He walked the 2 blocks to his hotel without a word. When he reached his room, his phone had 76 missed messages, dozens of texts, emails from law schools, advocacy groups, and of course journalists. He responded to none of them. Instead, he pulled out his laptop and opened the speech he'd started months ago, a talk he was scheduled to give in Ohio next week. Originally titled Policy and Perception. He backspaced the title and typed "Dignity on Camera." Then he began rewriting. Back in the control room at the View, the team reviewed the tape. One engineer looked up. "There's no way to cut it without losing the soul." Another nodded. "It's all raw and real. That's the story." And so for the first time in a long while, they chose not to edit for tone, not to polish, not to neutralize. They aired the segment again later that night, in full. The next morning, papers ran headlines not about outrage, but about accountability, about staying calm under pressure, about how the media had been challenged on its own turf. Joy issued a statement measured, not defensive. "I said something I shouldn't have." And Kash Patel handled it with grace. "I learned something. I hope our viewers did too." Kash declined to appear on other shows that week. "Let the moment speak," he said. And it did, loudly. For once, America didn't move on. It leaned in. 2 days after the interview aired, the ripple turned into a wave. College campuses held spontaneous forums on media, integrity, and race and political commentary. High schools discussed the segment in civics classes. Even churches streamed the full episode in community nights meant to discuss accountability and public discourse. Kash Patel wasn't touring networks. He was answering handwritten letters. From students, from veterans, from first-generation Americans who felt seen. One read, "I never thought I'd hear someone talk like that on TV and not be mocked for it." Another, "You didn't flinch, you stood your ground." My daughter watched with me. She asked why people don't always respond like that. I didn't have an answer. But Kash wasn't looking for praise. He was building something quieter, a new podcast, not about him, about giving space to those who didn't fit the TV molds. First episode, What Happens When You Stay in the Room. Guests, a retired school principal, a reformed public defender, a former host of a morning show who left due to political exhaustion. No shouting, no breaks for ads, just conversation. Meanwhile, The View faced pressure both internal and external. Ratings had spiked, but so had scrutiny. Editorial meetings were longer. Fact-checking became personal. Joy Behar returned to air with a different demeanor. In her next episode, she looked directly at the camera and said, "Growth is uncomfortable, but silence is worse." Viewers noticed. For Kash, the real work was always away from cameras. He launched a legal aid initiative, small, unfunded at first, but staffed by volunteers inspired by the moment. Their motto, "Truth doesn't need a mic, just a place to stand." He gave that Ohio speech, standing ovation before he even began. "You're not here for a show," he told the crowd. "You're here because something in you wants to answer back to the world when it whispers that you don't belong." Back in New York, the producers at The View re-watched the segment once more. One young editor said, "That's not just TV, that's a legacy." For the first time in a long while, nobody rolled their eyes. Outside, the city kept moving. But a moment had happened, a real one. And this time, it wasn't followed by memes or hot takes. It was followed by questions, by conversations, by change,